enjoy life, look around you, sleep, diet, exercise, and then staying positive and always find the bright side.
John Brink is the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. He was born in Nazi-occupied Holland. He immigrated to Canada at age 15 and ultimately created a company that today employs 400 plus people and funds his philanthropic nature, donating over $500,000 annually. At a late stage, he was diagnosed with ADHD, which he calls a superpower. He has an honorary doctorate law degree from the University of Northern British Columbia. He has been publishing a book a year since 2021 when he turned 80. He is here today to share his infectious passion for life and how he will extract the most out of the years to come.
Your body is extremely forgiving. It wants to be healthy, but it needs you in your mind to say, I can and I will, and I have that obligation to my body, because it will only take so much abuse, and then it will say, that's all we can do. And so the obvious are.
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms. Hi, welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity Podcast. This podcast is going to be pretty amazing, so make sure that you have blocked the time to hear the full story of our next guest, John Brink, a man who truly lives beyond the norms. At 84, I think it's 84, is that correct?
Correct.
Years of age?
Yes.
John is the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. He was born in Nazi-occupied Holland. He immigrated to Canada at age 15 and ultimately created a company that today employs 400 plus people and funds his philanthropic nature, donating over $500,000 annually. At a late stage, he was diagnosed with ADHD, which he calls a superpower. He has an honorary doctorate law degree from the University of Northern British Columbia. He has been publishing a book a year since 2021 when he turned 80. Those books are Against All Odds, How Attitude, Passion, and Work Ethic Lead to Success. The next book is ADHD Unlocked. The next is Finding Your Passion, Living Your Dreams. The next is Living Young, Dying Old, How to Thrive in Your Mid-80s. And I just found out he's going to have a book. He's going to keep the book a year going, at least into this next year. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that. He is here today to share his infectious passion for life and how he will extract the most out of the years to come. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. I'd like to be on your show.
Very cool. So I am often interviewing health professionals, and I use the first questions of my interviews typically to get to know the guests, how they grew up, how they ended up in the health industry. In your case, your backstory is so important and such a pervasive piece of what you share. It includes being born in Nazi-occupied Holland, immigrating to Canada with little to your name at age 15, and building an amazing business. Can you run the audience through that story for us, please?
Sure can. So I was born November the 1st, 1940, Chris, as you indicated, in Holland. And for those people that know Holland, it's the northeastern part of Holland, the top, within 10 minutes of the border with Germany. And again, for everybody appreciates it, Holland, relatively small. And, so my parents got married in 1938, were in love, and fairly quickly had, my dad had a job in a lumber mill that he worked at, and they had rented a house and fairly quickly had a boy and a girl. And then, then what happened is Hitler decided to invade Poland in 1939. And then the next thing that he decided is to send the Blitzkrieg into Western Europe. And my dad then was called into the Dutch army in April of 1940. And the last they heard from him, somebody had seen him in Rotterdam just before the downtown of Rotterdam got bombed and it killed thousands of people. So they wouldn't know for 5 years if he died or lived. And so it was a real tough time for my mom, 2 little kids, and then pregnant with me. I was born, as I said, November the 1st, 1940. And, so the first thing that I remember of the war was when I was about 3.5, 4 years old, and that were bombers overhead. They were bombing the war infrastructure in northeastern Germany and Bremen, Kiel, Hamburg, all those places. And my mom would take us kids outside on a flat roof that we had behind our house, not to just look at the planes, but the sound was immense. Hundreds of bombers overhead, and the fear of being inside was more than being outside. So they would be outside, and then in the distance we could see the cities burning and the sky would be red. And so that's the first thing that I remember, and the fear of that and the sound, and you will never hear it again, but I can still hear it now, even nearly 81 years later. And then the next thing I remember is that 1944, in particular, was a difficult year because the Germans had cut off all the food supply to Holland. And as little kids, then nearly 4.5, 5 years old, I would go together with my brother and sister, who were 1 and 2 years older than me, every morning with gunny sacks into the railroad yards and pick up anything edible and burnable. The reason that we did as kids is because the Germans wouldn't shoot us. They boot us one, but we'd be back the following day. The next thing that then I remember is things got very rough in early 1945. As we all know, the Allied forces landed in Normandy in the summer of 1944, and then the Canadian part of the Allied forces pushed their way through France, Belgium, eastern part of Holland, and pushed through the top of Holland the Germans back into Germany. And there wasn't much left for them, and the Germans, things were pretty rough as they were trying to get out of Holland and back into Germany, and we saw far too much that we should not have seen, and things were very, very difficult. The next part that I remember is that we were on April the 12th, 1945, we were liberated by the Canadian Army, and it made such an impression on me as nearly 4.5, 5 years old that I always knew from that point forward, as I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And it took me till I was not 15, but 23 years old until I left Holland for Canada. And so that's what I did. And then
well, let me just interject here, right? So you're on the roof, right? And you're literally watching and hearing history, right? Like, these are things that, I only know, and most of my audience are only going to know from the movies, and you see troops pushing back and forth. You're literally watching these things. Really, what an impression! Obviously, you still remember it clearly. That must have left, and wow. And so then the Canadians free you. They left. Was there maybe one interaction with a Canadian soldier or something that really was like, oh, these are great people? Not just that they freed you, right? Because like, if they just came in, you didn't interact with anyone, maybe you wouldn't have had the impression you had. Did you have a very specific interaction with any of the soldiers?
Yes, right behind our house, that is maybe 30 feet away. The fence of our house was up against the schoolyard. There were about 25 Canadian soldiers from the Canadian Red Cross that were stationed there for about a month and a half. And every morning, you can well imagine, we had no food, nothing to eat for a long time, and lots of stress and
Misery.
difficult time and seeing too many things we should not have seen. And we would go every morning to that schoolyard and then interact with the Canadians who would give us bread with cheese and butter, and the cheese and the butter was bigger than the bread. And everybody was called Johnny. We didn't speak the language, but we did, really. And so that left a lasting impression with me, and likely left the impression that's I would go to the land of my heroes.
Yeah.
And
The land of cheese and bread in this
yeah,
case.
no, yeah. So, and I was affected by PTSD, still very much part of my life. The other part, the fear of losing the only parent that we had. Everybody had the same issues all around us. So the people were very understanding, but everybody was fighting for their survival. And during the war years, the German army would come in and take people away to the work camps in Germany or concentration camps. We had quite a Jewish community, and obviously there was nobody left after the Germans were finished. So all of that had an immense impact on us. And so, but it's still very much part of my life, even now, more than 80 years later.
And your dad was working in a lumber mill, right? Like before he got recruited into the military. And
Correct.
then was that one of your first jobs also kind of as you were developing, coming out of your teenage years?
Yeah, I like that question, Chris, is that my dad did come back after 5 years and after the war ended. We didn't know if he was dead or alive, but he did come back. But he was a changed man. As a lot of people don't respectfully understand that if the war is over, everything doesn't go back to normal. It doesn't. It takes sometimes generations before it goes back to a sense of normality. Like for myself, academically, I was not a success story. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And then they said, what are we going to do with this guy? I was not quite 13 years old, 12 and a half or so. And some people said, well, maybe send him to a mentally challenged school. Fortunately, my parents said, no, we're not going to do that. So, and my dad had a friend that had a furniture factory. And so they got me a job in the furniture factory and working with my hands. The interesting part about that is that I was only 12 and a half, not quite 13 years old, and I became a laborer. The friends that I used to have that went to college and university kind of looked down on me because I was a laborer. And so it took me a long time to reconcile that, although I was quite successful in what I was doing. And so I felt I had to start all over again. And I always struggle with the idea, why were they so successful and I wasn't? What's different about me? And it took me a long, long time until I discovered what it was. So, but the first thing that I wanted to do is I had the dream of going to Canada, but the second one was to dream to build a lumber mill in Canada and to start with nothing. And I wanted to go initially when I was 17, my parents wouldn't let me. And then I was 18, I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force for 2 years. And then worked again in the industry in Holland, the forest industry, and then went to Canada with a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, very little money to start from the bottom up and with the dream of building a mill. And then I knew I wanted to go to British Columbia because that's where they're growing all the forest. I couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. And so by the time I got to Vancouver by train, 4 days, 5 nights, oh my God, that's a long way to go.
Yes.
And I went to the immigration office. Fortunately, there was a German fella. I could speak some German. I told him what I wanted to do. He said, go to Prince George. That's where I am today as I'm sitting here 60 years later. That's
And
where
the
I
picture
am.
behind you is Prince George?
And is part of my operations here. Some part of the operations, So in any event, I was here started with nothing, and when I came off the bus here in July of 1965 with my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and with my money, I counted it at least 3 times my money. I had exactly $25.47. But what I did have lots of is attitude. I've always have a positive attitude. Even when I was still in Holland, I always had a positive attitude. Passion, whatever I do, I give it 125%. Work ethic, even still today, I work harder than anybody. Is that I still get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I'm always in a hurry. I think I'm late. And then I work 12, 13 hours, 14 hours a day, and still do that today. And so did I get the lumber mill? Yes, I did. And then we have probably 10 other different companies. So we have 4 silos. The one is lumber manufacturing. We have mills here in Prince George and some other mills in northern British Columbia, and we're still trying to double our companies in size even now on the lumber side. Then we're probably the largest warehousing company in northern British Columbia. We do warehousing, distribution, and logistics. Probably will double that company in the next 5 years. And then we also have real estate, both residential, commercial, and industrial, and we're probably one of the biggest ones in northern British Columbia as well, and we will double that company. And then the other one is doing media, and in media I'm a speaker, presenter, in demand, and then I'm an author. My 5th book will come out in the next 2 months. I'm working on the 6th one already. And then, I'm very active podcaster, top 1% globally. I think on podcasting, I've done about 360 or so, where I'm hosting, probably 150, where I'm a guest. And I love it. It's just at the beginning, in my opinion. And so we are, I think, on YouTube, we are at, where are we at in YouTube? 700,000, wow. And then I'm looking at doing a platform, Chris. So we'll probably start that in the spring.
So it's a shame you don't have anything going on, right? Like, I don't know what you do with all of your time. You probably like to garden, and I did want to kind of roll back a little bit. You're working in the lumber mills, right? Just in your 20s. Either I read this or I just have the impression, because of your personality, that you were really successful in that, right? So you were struggling kind of relative to your peers being a laborer. And then I think you were just crawling up the ladder. Talk a little bit about that and what drove you and why did you get promotions that I think you got?
So I was very young when I started working in the furniture factory. I loved lumber. My grandfather was a master carpenter. My dad worked in the lumber industry and still did after the war. And so that has always been part of my life. And I was very, very good at it, understanding lumber manufacturing and then things around business. And so although I did not do that in a formal way, going to university, but rather from my experience. And so even when I came to Canada, I started as a cleanup man, lumber piler. Once I started to learn to speak and understand English, I became a supervisor very, very quickly. And within a year and a half, I was a superintendent of one of the larger mills here. And then within 2 years, I was part owner of a little sawmill. But that didn't go fast enough for me. And then I started the company that I still have now, 50 years later. I started a company called the Brink Forest Products, which is now part of the Brink group of companies. The amazing thing about it, though, Chris, is that even already when I was successful, and everybody said, "Oh, you're so successful," I didn't feel that way. I still felt that I had not succeeded. And so until in 1997, I walked into a store here in Prince George, and I picked up a book, and I have it in my studio. I still have the actual book that I picked up. And the title of the book was Driven to Distraction by Dr. Halliwell. And Dr. Halliwell, very interesting individual, wrote 18 books, Professor Dr. Halliwell, but he is ADHD and dyslexia. And so when I saw the book and started looking, I had no idea what ADHD was. No idea until then. And I said, oh my God, that's me. And actually, the actual book, if I had it here, I would open the first page and I showed you that I wrote in that book, January 1997 in Dutch. Now I finally know who I am. And so it changed my life. And the more I learned about it, that the frequency of occurrence was suggested to be around 8% male and female. I believed it was much higher than that. And so the other part that I learned from the more I found out about it is that it is a superpower. And I still believe that today. And so now the interesting part about it is Dr. Halliwell, Driven to Distraction. As I said earlier, my podcast is 360 or so. My podcast On the Brink 203 is a podcast with Dr. Halliwell.
How did that feel?
Oh, amazing, because he's probably recognized globally as an expert in the field of ADHD. Has written 5 books about distraction. 18 of the other one has dyslexia as well as ADHD, and so do I, obviously. So I urge people that to watch that podcast 203 On the Brink with John A. Brink, is that. During our discussion, I suggest that he's the expert, not me, other than that I lived it. So I said to Dr. Halliwell that I believe that the frequency of occurrence is probably around 20%, not 8. He said, no, John, it's probably more like that, 25%, if not more. And then the other thing that we discussed is, in all the time that I've been in business, got to know a lot of business people, very successful individuals, and entrepreneurs and business people, that I believe from my experience that 50% of the successful, and the operative is successful entrepreneurs, I suggested to Dr. Halliwell, are ADHD. He said, no, John, probably 75%. I agree with him. And so the more I got to know about ADHD, the more I felt I had an obligation to write about it. And I wrote the book, ADHD Unlocked, very successful. And, the frequency of occurrence higher than, in my opinion, 25 to 30% with the population. And for anyone that will interact, they will have people in their surroundings, either in the families themselves, that are ADHD, and should read about it and understand it, because they tend to be different. And that's not in a negative way, but in a positive way. To understand them is that they have qualities like, if I go back to myself in grade 3 and grade 7 that I failed, is I was very good at numbers, and I was a very good writer, not a reader, but a writer. And so, and still am today, so that obviously I'm a very good writer, and then I'm very good at numbers because I'm very good in business.
Yeah, I have a suspicion that you're very good at a lot of things, like being able to interact with people, right? Being able to hold people accountable, which is a non-trivial task. Like all of these things that are necessary. There's one thing to have a successful business, but to have as successful a business as you have for so long, like that just speaks to a lot of things. I want to come back and ask a couple questions about ADHD in that first book that you read by Dr. Honeywell, right? It was Dr. Honeywell?
Hollywell, yeah.
Hollywell. But you mentioned that you arrived in Canada and you had $25.47,
Correct.
2 pairs of clothes and 3 books. What were the 3 books?
An interesting question. So they were Management by Drucker in Dutch.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one was Logical Thinking in Dutch. And then the other one was About Canada. Those were the 3 books.
Yeah. Wow. That I knew you would remember what they are. You have a very.
I still have those in my bookcase. They are very promptly displayed because I've gone through them many, many times.
So I'll ask this, and I think we can remove Canada because that might not apply to a lot of people and doesn't serve the purpose that it did for you. Of the other 2 books, Management and Logical Thinking, which would be the first that you would recommend to an entrepreneur?
Management by Drucker, likely. Yeah. And then Logical Thinking has been very much part of what I do in my management style is, thinking it through logically and pursuing directions, may that be growth or challenges or whatever else. I usually try to take a logical approach.
Mm. Yeah. How do you, everything that I read about business, the more you can remove emotion from the decisions, the
Correct.
better decisions you're going to make. Obviously things are driven by emotions, but you got to try and mitigate that. So it's 1997. You have a successful business at that point. You're struggling accepting kind of your success, and you find this book on ADHD. What about understand? Was it a pretty quick process, pretty quick switch from, okay, now I'm successful and I understand what other people might be calling weaknesses and maybe what you were even calling weaknesses in yourself? Was that a pretty quick switch to get flipped when you kind of understood that you had ADHD? Or did it take you a number of years to assimilate that information and then kind of recognize you're successful? Or maybe you even still struggle today. Like there's the success here, right, in your brain. Yeah, like all of the numbers that, you're good with numbers. All the numbers tell you you're successful. Do you feel successful?
Very, very, very good question, Chris. Is that for me, it took a long time before I reconciled who am I? And that caused me challenges. It still made me successful, but I didn't feel successful. And there were 2 issues in particular. Already up to 1990, and I was already here then for 25 years and already had successful businesses around me. I was not good at communications. I could interact with 2 or 3 people around me in my companies, but outside of that, I was not very good at that. I didn't have the self-confidence. And so then what happened to me, and these were again elements that changed my life, is that an ex-sister-in-law that I had said, I want you to go with me to Toastmasters. And I said, Toastmasters? What's that all about? She said, well, it's about communication skills. And I said, okay, are you going to ask me any questions? She said, no. I said, okay, I'll go down and sit down. And so that's what I did. Halfway through the meeting, somebody said, hey, John, tell us all about it. I said, oh, my God, I'll never go back here. And so for those people that have heard about it but don't know what it is, it's developing communication skills. And probably as we speak, 450,000 people in North America are actively involved. It has been here for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Probably 10 million people around the world have taken part in it. And it improves in a structured, proven way communication skills. And saying, what did you find the most important part of that, John, is become a good listener, for one. The second one is to be able to speak on your feet and articulate issues in a correct way. And then the other one is business communications, how to conduct business meetings, and then making presentations. What do they look like? How do you have good presentations? What should they? And that practice is being practiced among peers that have the same ideas, and Toastmasters works very, very well. So I became a member, and I was so fearful of those meetings. I could have crawled out of there, and I've seen many, many new people that want. I've never seen somebody that has had so much anxiety as me. But I was there for 10 years, became a DTM, a designated speaker, Toastmaster, and is the highest level in Toastmasters, and changed my life. So between meeting the Canadians, April the 12th, 1945, and what followed the following month, as you indicated, interacting with them, that changed my life. Then going to Canada, starting with nothing, changed my life. The next thing that happened, Toastmasters for 10 years, between 1990 and 2000. And then finding the book from Dr. Halliwell in regards to ADHD, those combinations changed me. So that even after I read the book, 1997, and took me 5 years before I would go to my doc, who delivered our two daughters, was a personal friend, and he said, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And so we checked out, and yes, I do. And so the more I found out about it, the more I started to understand why and how. And so the other part is that I found important for me, that changed a lot of things, that by then I was 62 years old when I got the diagnosis. From the time that I was kicked out of grade 7 at the age of 12 and a half, nearly 70 years later, I was 62 when my doc, 50 years later, I got the diagnosis. So for 50 years, I was always wondering, who am I? Why am I different? It took me that long until I then reconciled it. And it kind of, in a long way, answers your question that you say, is it part of you? Is it still with you? And so, no, I love it. And I do a lot of presentations on all kinds of business things and all the other things. I'm a very good presenter now. I wasn't then, but now I am. And I have an amazing memory, and I'm very popular as a presenter. And then, so by the time I'm presenting on business or whatever the issues I may be presenting, I always include something about ADHD. And by the time I'm done, I'm always asking, who in the audience, 200-300 people there, whatever, who is ADHD and who think maybe they are ADHD, and all kinds of fingers go up. And so, and by the time I'm done about ADHD, there are numerous people in the audience say, "Damn, I wish I had it too."
Why am I so unlucky that I don't have ADHD?
So I felt then, and I did all along, since I found the book and I started to understand that I have an obligation to speak about it and to write about it. And because there are so many, and I've met so many virtually on a daily basis, where I meet young people, or even people that are older, that have really never talked to anybody about it, and still look at it like a liability. Well, it isn't. It is an ability that gives you a different approach to whatever you're doing. And if you do it well and understand it well, you can really make it work for you.
Yeah, have you read the book? There's a book called David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell, which talks about all of these things that are perceived advantages that are disadvantages, right? The David and Goliath scenario,
Right.
and all these perceived disadvantages that turn out to be advantages. I think in his book, he quotes, and I've heard this number in other places, that about 30% of successful entrepreneurs are known to have dyslexia. This process of overcoming challenges. By the way, you're extremely interesting. The last thing that I would think a dyslexic person would be good at is writing. So it's storytelling. Maybe your spelling's inaccurate or whatever, but the storytelling is really good, right? Like that's a key piece of the writing.
That's who I am. And that's what
Yeah.
my book's on. I'm a storyteller.
Yeah. Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast. I have to imagine that pretty quickly in 1997, after kind of learning that you're ADHD, that became some of the talks that you were doing in Toastmasters. Like that had to happen pretty quickly. You mentioned in Toastmasters, you become a good listener. One of my, public speaking, people have a fear of public speaking above death. Like people are more afraid of public speaking than of dying. And there's a couple things to share here, but one is I feel like one of the challenges is that people have in public speaking is that they'll get up on stage and everybody in the room will be judging them the way they judge speakers in front of the stage. Like people tend to be judgmental. Oh, they could have said it this way, and critical, where if they let go of that criticism of the speaker, then they can get up on stage and be a speaker. And, there's all sorts of things I'm sure that Toastmasters teaches is you're there. If your focus is to teach people, is to help the people in the audience or entertain them or whatever it is, not to worry about how good or bad you look, then you can actually improve dramatically. And I'll turn it back over to you because you probably have some stuff to add. Going into Toastmasters with as much anxiety as you have had at the time, that is absolutely one of your keys to success. Like I've always believed, the size of your success zone is the size of your comfort zone. And here's something that was not kind of on the edge of your comfort zone. It was like 3 leagues away from where your comfort zone ended, and you embraced it and jumped into it. I think that's a great lesson for people in general. Like this is a longevity and health podcast, and we'll get to some longevity and health stuff here soon. But it's a great lesson. Even if your journey is in longevity and it is in health, there are things that you may need to embrace, whether it's, working out harder or longer, whether it's changing your diet, whether it's really focusing on sleep and putting that device, you're going to have to make those changes. And I think that's a strong lesson. And the other thing I want to share is I think entrepreneurship is one of the best ways to pursue self-discovery, because I love this statement. John, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news for you. The bad news is everything that is not going the way you want it to is entirely your fault. The good news is that everything that is not going the way you want to is entirely your fault. Because if it wasn't your fault, you can't do anything about it, right? So you are the master of everything. And when you hit roadblocks in business and in life, this is true, the quicker you can accept that you're the problem and that you need to move through that problem, the more successful you'll be. And again, this applies to your health journey. I don't know if that fired any synapses for you.
Yeah, I like that approach very much. I'm very lucky with all the companies that I have and studying everything vertically from the ground up. I'm the sole shareholder in my company, so and what I do is I deal with problems all the time. It's part of my life, and and it's always the same approach as what you indicated, is that the other part that I believe, just coming back to the comments that you made earlier, is being a presenter for a lot of people creates anxiety. It still does for me to a certain extent when I go to the States. It has to, because otherwise it wouldn't be the same. But once I'm there, I know they will never forget me. I know that already. And so, and then people say to me, well, I want to get a speech. How do I do that? I said, start here. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. It's opening, a body, and a close. And then, then the other part about it is that the anxiety part for people that, and it's not unique to anybody in particular, a lot of people are extremely fearful of doing presentations. And so that's why it was so important for me to do Toastmasters in 1990, then in 1990 till 2000. In 1997, ADHD became part of me, that I kind of put all the things together for me, and the whole question, who am I, became clearer. And so then gave me confidence that I was no less than, no more than, no better than, but that I had certain skill sets that were unique to me. And obviously I became a good presenter and then a good writer. So with the writing, the first book that I wrote is this one. As you already know, writing books is not easy. And so everybody said, hey, John, you have such an interesting life. You should write a book. And so for 20 years, I started. And I knew 5-6 years ago that if I didn't do it now, it likely would never happen. So I did this. So it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. And this is the result. And it is against all odds. And it's not about hurrah, hurrah, how successful John is, but rather the other things, all the ups and downs along the way. And I'm a storyteller. It's a very, very popular book.
Very cool. So let's get into a little bit of kind of health and wellness. I could continue with this story, certainly down the entrepreneurial path. I've been on a long one, and really love talking about it. But for the purposes of this podcast, what role has physical activity played in your life, and how do you prioritize movement? How have you prioritized movement? And then maybe how has that changed? I imagine as a successful entrepreneur, there were probably times when, and maybe this is not true, where like it fell off and you weren't prioritizing movement and your health. Talk about how health has been a part of your journey.
Yeah. So, very, very good question, Chris, is that, and usually what happens with most people at some point in their life, they get a shock. And for me, I was lucky. My wife is a vegetarian, but I didn't listen to her as well as I could have and should have. I did to a certain extent, but not as well as I could have, until in 2008, I got a case of diverticulitis. And so I was already 68 years old. And for people that maybe don't know what diverticulitis is, if I have pain on I'm not a doc. If I have pain in my right side, it's probably appendix, and left side, it could is the colon, and it could well be diverticulitis. And if there is pain, they change your diet or whatever they do. But in my case, it ruptured. And so, and then you have about 48 hours before things will become extremely delicate. It could even kill you. Yeah, all the toxins. And so I came this close. They took 20 centimeters out of my colon. And the doc came the following morning and said, hey, John, you came this close. And so that gave me a thing that I started to look in a serious way at diet. Listening to my wife in particular, and became vegan, and 80-20, I call it. And then at the same time, I was just like everybody else. I go to the gym And every year at year end, I'm going to say, I'm going to do this, that, and the other thing. And then I'm going to buy a membership to the gym, and I go for 2 weeks, and then I can find 100 reasons why I'm too busy to go to the gym until the next year. But I knew I had to do that differently. So I hired a trainer. And so my life is appointments, and that's what I do. And I started in a serious way going to the gym. After I did that for 6 years, with the trainer, one day somebody came up to me and said, and my trainer, and say, "Hey, John, have you ever thought about competing?" I said, "Competing? Me? Yeah." And I said, "Why not?" And so that's what I did. I started working in particular to competing, bodybuilding and physique. And I wrote a book about this, Living Young, Dying Old. And that's a picture of me. That's what I look like now at 84.
Wow.
And that's what I kind of look like pretty much the same when I went training. First in Northern British Columbia, came in second in bodybuilding, third in physique. Competed provincially here, did about the same. That qualified me for the nationals and the Arnolds. And then COVID came. And so that slowed me down a bit. And so now I'm again going to the gym. And after this podcast, I'm heading to the gym again and training very, very hard. That's how I look. And and getting ready for the Arnold's in 1985 or 2025 and competing locally and regionally. And so that's kind of what I'm doing there. And then on the diet, I'm much more conscious of it. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 15 years.
Let me jump in there, right? So at 68, and you started really kind of getting dedicated to training. You had diverticulitis. You kind of shifted gears, decided you needed to start training regularly, got a trainer involved, and you became a bodybuilder, but not just a bodybuilder, because that's not hard enough. You became a vegan bodybuilder, because that's supposed to be harder, right? Like I have not gone the vegan way. You said something about 80-20 vegan. What do you mean there?
I do still some, if I'm a vegetarian, then we would do no meat of any sort. I still do fish and chicken.
Okay.
And so, but most of it is, and the interesting part that you may find is that I do all the shopping for my wife, myself. And if I go through the grocery store, I always stay on the outside, not on the inside. Yep. That's where all the super processed foods are. And I don't know what is in it. So I'm very conscientious of what do we eat and what is our diet.
Was there any main thing coming out of the surgery, the colonoscopy, right? No, that's a view. They remove some of your colon. Was there anything in particular that you removed from your diet that you focused on to make sure that your colon was in good shape?
No, I eat a lot of greens. That is just part of my diet, and this has now been a long time ago, so I'm just doing fine.
Okay.
And so what they did is they cut 20 centimeters out of my colon, put it back together again. And since that time, obviously I'm very conscientious about health and fitness and I'm doing very, very well.
So at a time when most men your age are really concerned, or should be, maybe aren't as concerned as they should be about sarcopenia, right? Muscle wasting, you're actually actively working on adding muscle, which is not on any chart. There's no chart where you're adding muscle. What does your protein consumption look like? I know it can be very hard on vegetarian or vegan diets. Are you eating a lot of fish to kind of get to the protein? What's your protein target per day?
Yeah, so not, the protein in particular is that I eat a fair amount of protein, 150 grams in that area. But if I'm going for competition, then usually increase the amount of protein. And so that the next competition for me is in June, I think. So then in about April, May, we start modifying my diet for the competition. So, but normally I stay in, as you can already see, I'm in very good shape. I work out hard, so this is not tittle-tattling around. I work harder, likely do lift heavier than most 20-year-olds in the gym. And it's just part of what I do for the last 15 years.
Yeah, and it just feels amazing. I have added in the probably last year between 5 and 8 pounds of muscle, and I'm 55. People even my age aren't supposed to do that, let alone at your age. Are you weight training every single day? Where does cardio sit in? Is it zone 2 cardio? What does that look like?
I usually work out with my trainer 3 days a week. And then I'm starting being very active during the day in the business. I'm a go-go guy, so I'm always in a hurry, So and then on the weekends, my wife, myself, we do a lot of walking. We have a gym at home, do some cardio, and so the interesting part, Chris, is that for most people it's a challenge. I love going to the gym. I love it. And I suggest to people to say, well, how do you do it? That it's so important in terms of longevity. All the things that you are talking about, and I'm talking about in my book, Living Young, Dying Old, is that, the quality of life. For most people, the last decade in their life, they usually have a whole handful of chemicals they are using to fix all kinds of problems that they have, or struggling with major physical issues. And I'm trying to saying, I think one of the questions you asked, what do you think your lifespan is? Well, tongue in cheek, I said I want to be 120. So and so that I will stay active doing what I'm doing. I work long hours. I'm a go-go guy. I love going to the gym. But for those people that are difficulty with exercise and diet, I always say, start with go for half an hour walk. Do it with a partner or somebody else, and then keep doing it if you can, an hour a day, half an hour a day. Watch out for your diet. It's I believe in vitamin D, very important. Get sleep 8-9 hours a day. The other one, get physical exercise, and be careful with your diet. And I do a lot of greens. And then if you do, and then in exercise, as I said, even if you go for a walk, and you know what will happen is what happened to me, is that saying, hey, Chris or John, what are you doing? You look great. And so that's the reward, and that's what will happen. And then you get to the point that you start enjoying it, going to the gym or exercising. And then with the diet, once you get used to it, it doesn't have to be not very tasty, but you can then develop a habit of being very conscientious of diet. And so the combination of all of it, it feels good and you feel good, and it creates that quality of life that is so critically important. So, but I always say it's not age, it's the quality of life that is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an interesting thing here because you're talking about the reward is somebody saying that you look good. And that feels amazing, right? Every time it's ever happened really to anybody who on the planet, they're like, oh, I feel amazing. But it is, in fact, the opposite of what is a typical challenge for somebody with ADHD, right? ADHD is there are things that are in front of me that are the challenge. And if they're not due now, they don't matter, which is probably part of your I'm always on the go. Because if you're actually not on the go, then nothing matters. And that's not how you're wired, right? how, and this ties into one of my questions. I have a phrase that I speak about regularly, which is and I'll give you context, but that success is really boring, right? And I give the example of Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps swam the same, 40,000 laps of his pool in the same pool at the same temperature. He ate the same 15,000 calories every day for decades. He didn't do it for a week or a month, and even it's not even the ramp up like you're talking about going into your next event. It's decades, and so it's a trick. It's a mind trick to be able to, because working out hurts, right? You and I like it. You and I have figured out how we like it. I wonder if you have any, how do you train yourself for the short goals, right? The short little smiley faces on the calendar that don't really mean anything, but have to mean everything so that you get to that compliment. Like how do you get there, or do you have any ideas about that?
So I like the things that I do, to find that passion is important for me, even if it is business or any of the other things that I'm doing. The reason that I enjoy going to the gym is that because I'm looking at competing as saying, okay, competing, okay, that gives me a goal to work towards. So now what I'm doing already is that part of competing in my group is that, and it's 55 years and older, and there are not too many people my age. Most of them are dead or near dead, so not competing. And so I enjoy it. And now already what I do is not only do I go to the gym, I work very hard when I'm there, and I'm starting to do posing already for my competition that is coming up, and that's already on my mind. And the same with diet, I like the idea of experiment, my wife, myself, experiment with new diets that fit the things that we are doing, and we make it interesting. And then the reward is that, we have horses, we have a farm, both my wife and myself ride English dressage. So we do a lot of stuff that keeps us active. And so keeps our mind active. And then obviously the books are interesting for me. I work on them a lot of times on the weekends, doing different stuff than I do during the week. And everything that I do, I have to have that passion. And that's why I wrote this book, is Finding Your Passion. Because I heard a story on, one of the US channels, and they said that in Canada, it's probably the same. 75% of the people that work in the United States don't like the job. And I believe Canada is the same. And 70% of the 75% are looking for another job. And I do a lot of presenting to younger people. And when I do at high schools, colleges, universities that I speak to, is saying that, so after you're done here, what do you want to do for a career? And a lot of people say, I don't know. And I said, well, that respectfully, that what I would do is saying, you want to be a truck driver, talk to a truck driver, see what they're doing, what is involved, blah, 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 all the other kind of stuff. You want to be a contractor, build houses, talk to somebody that does that kind of a thing. Contract, what does it involve? How about this? How about that? Or a doc, or a lawyer, or a business person, or an entrepreneur. Talk to them. What is involved? And it will then give you a direction which to go. And because it is so critically important, is that, finding your passion, living the dream, and saying, okay, John, then, you've been working since you were 12 and a half, and now you're 84. So for the last 72 years you've been working. Are you living the dream? I sure am, every day. And it makes a huge difference. And if I hear people that hate their jobs or do not like it, then you take that with you. It becomes part of your life. You take it home with you. You try not to, but it's so critically important to enjoy every day as a special day. And I fly around a lot, and in North America, I do a lot of business in the United States, and I usually sit by the window, and I look out the window and say, it's paradise. It is paradise. If I look around the world and all the challenges that people have around the world, Ukraine, Middle East, and you can go on and on, South America, blah, blah, Venezuela, Cuba, blah, blah, blah. Not like us. We have it all. And I'm not sure if we always appreciate that. And then maybe the benefit that I had growing up during the war years, seeing my family having a hard time getting their life back together again after the war, being affected by PTSD myself, even still now, by the inner child, at counseling for that in my 50s, and so I love life. I enjoy, and all the things that I'm doing, I enjoy it. And if I don't, then the point that you made is a very good one. Is that my objective in my companies to make them boringly consistent and do very good. Well, once they're boringly consistent, I'm bored. I'm looking for challenges, and that is part of my ADHD, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like we could talk for hours. That would just be me picking your brain and bouncing whatever ideas I've formulated in my short amount of years, relatively speaking. But we have come to time. I do have some kind of rapid wrap-up questions that I was hoping you could answer. And the first one is, do you have a target age that you want to live to? I think you said 120. Was that?
Yes.
120, I love it. And how long do you think humans can live?
Well, that's a very good question connected to this one and all the discussions that we have. That I believe there is no reason that we will not see the average age going up from where it is now, probably in the high 70s, early 80s, to gradually work their way up to, in the next 20, 30 years, probably seeing 100 will not be an anomaly. It will be a lot of cases, that is possible.
That'll become the norm more regularly.
Correct.
What 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts, to longevity and a long health span would you share?
I would say, sleep, diet, exercise, and then staying positive. Enjoy life, look around you, and enjoy life. And always find the bright side, right?
And that really means something coming from you because you were kind of listing off the challenges that you had. One, probably almost no one who's listening to this podcast was ever looking for food right at any point and then getting chased away potentially from access to food. So to have a positive outlook, you've really got you've got the experience of that scale of like how it could be and how it is. Sometimes this is a little bit harder, but what are 1 to 2 things that people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
It will not come easy, and that to have discipline in terms of your body is extremely forgiving. It wants to be healthy, but it needs you and your mind to say, I can and I will. And I have that obligation to my body because it will only take so much abuse. And then it will say, that's all we can do. And so the obvious are, don't smoke, don't drink alcohol, and don't use drugs. And those are all the no-brainers. And then I know so many people that say, well, I'm too old for that. But you're never too old. And let me be the example of it. If I can do it, anybody can do it. But it's the key to stay positive in your mind.
Excellent. John, how can people... yes, go ahead. Attitude,
passion, work ethic. That's the foundation. JohnABrink.com.
Is there any social media they should be following?
Yeah, we're on all the major ones, YouTube. You name the ones, we're all over them.
And the handle is the same, the John A. Brink.
.com. Yeah.
Excellent.
And my podcasts are On the Brink with John A. Brink.
On the Brink. And I need to listen to episode 203 about ADHD. Actually, I'll listen to that with my son. And what in the near future are you excited about?
I'm excited about, we growing the companies. We are, it's a challenge out there economically. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about my books. I'm excited about this afternoon. I'm going to the gym here in the next 15 minutes and have a really hard workout.
That is awesome. All right. You can find him at johnabrink.com. He's got 4, soon to be 5 books to look up. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Chris, it was a pleasure, and I enjoyed it. Let's make sure we stay in touch.
Absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.